Okay, let's start this after show the way it's meant to be started. I'm Maggie Malloy, and I'm on a mission to shine a light on the forgotten side of the Irish property market. Ta-da! Every time I say that, it just sounds like I'm a robot. I've said it that many times for doing voiceovers. Sorry, I just had to do that. So, after show, here's what I want to do. I want to go through all the houses that we showed Aisling tonight. I'm going to let you know which one was my favourite. I'm going to show you a couple of little sneak peeks of things that I took photos of and little videos of when I was at the houses. Now, this is one of the reasons why this video is in portrait instead of landscape, because I'm not really able to splice in portrait videos off my phone into a landscape YouTube video. So this is what we're going to have to deal with tonight. Next season, if I'm lucky enough to get a next season, I'll make sure to video all the houses in landscape mode to make it easier on myself and you guys at home. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and we'll move on to the first house. Okay, so the first house that I brought Aisling to was quite a big townhouse in Borrisokane in County Tipperary. Now, I think my favourite part of that house, apart from the fact that it was pretty much nearly finished inside, I mean, there was very little that she would need to do, you know, kind of with getting her hands dirty and stuff like that. I think the best part of it, other than that, was probably the fact that it had a spare house attached to the side of it. Now, I know the house wasn't in perfect condition. She wasn't going to be knocking through and opening up her breakfast room anytime soon. But it was one of those properties that if there is any kind of potential for making money, you know, even selling on a little bit of it if she ever got strapped for cash in the future, renting it out as a long-term rental, renting it out as a holiday rental, that second building was one of those little things that it just makes the house so much more valuable. Now, the fact that it was on this tiny little square in Borrisokane and you would essentially own two of the properties on that square made it quite a little bit of prime real estate in that town. You know, it was a really nice old part of the town. The town itself is gorgeous, and it gives you that nice balance of being in a village, or essentially a town, because Borrisokane is a town, and being not too far from the countryside that you feel like you're just kind of hemmed in. I mean, we were probably all of about 2 fields away from the countryside, even though we were in the square in the middle of the town. So that's the great thing I think about, you know, towns in rural Ireland, is that you're not really totally isolated, obviously, but you're also not really hemmed in. So, I mean, they were the things I really, really liked about the house. I think inside it, my favourite thing was that built-in cabinet in the breakfast room. I mean, that little breakfast room was gorgeous anyway. I have a little video that I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes that I took when I was inside it, and a little close-up of that press with the reeded glass. Lads, that was just the most beautiful thing. Definitely they were my favourite parts of that house. I think the fact that it had a working bathroom and a huge back garden with rear access as well were just absolutely lovely. Yeah, so that's it. Borrisokane, lovely house, big house for the money, and a lot going for it that she could have probably moved into quite quickly, which is always a plus for me. Okay, so the next house that we went to was the little yellow cottage up in the mountains in County Limerick. Now, I love that house. One of the main reasons I picked it for Aisling was because of how finished it was in the inside. I mean, someone had obviously lived in it up until quite recently, and, you know, it had been minded very, very well. Someone had modernised it for whoever was there. The fact that it had that oil burner and things like that in that were quite modern, they're the kind of things I think that make moving into a house a lot easier for a young girl, a young guy, anybody, you know, anything that makes the place a bit more modern and it shows that the place was well maintained are all huge, huge assets. The setting around it with the trees and the big back garden with it and just that kind of stuff made it just all the more idyllic for me. I mean, I like isolation. It's something that I would have absolutely no problem with. I know everyone's not the same, but I think it's one of those houses where it was really, really cheap. And I think the only trade-off really that you were giving up there was the fact that it was a little bit more remote than other houses. So if you had yourself and your partner and your kids and you were going to be up there, but you were all going to be together and there was going to be loads of noise and laughter and all, that place gets a lot less isolated very, very quickly. And to be honest, when we were there even filming that day, there was quite a lot of, you know, movement in the area. There was cars going past, stuff like that. You know, it wasn't just tumbleweeds outside the door. So, I mean, I think that little house was a good, smart buy. It's a solid little house, you know, a nice modern roof on it. I think the thing to remember about this house as well is that there wasn't a massive amount needed to be done to it. So a lot of the time when we look at low priced houses, we look at low mortgage payments, they generally will have this big list of things that need to be done. You're looking at spending maybe 30, 40,000 plus on your house to do it up. Like, she could have moved into this house straight away. Whatever the price that house was, her mortgage payments were going to be based on that. That's a huge thing. I mean, it mightn't suit her necessarily, but for somebody that's going to be a great little bargain, and it's going to be a house that your mortgage payments ultimately are more than likely only going to be based on the price that was advertised on the website. Like, for the house, it's not like you're spending this fortune on it. You don't need to build extensions if you don't want to. You don't need to knock doors out of it. You don't need to knock rooms through. This is a fully functional little house that generations of people have already lived quite successfully in. And you know, the amount of care that was taken to mind this house, I think, is really going to pay off for future generations. So I think my favourite part of this house, it's a kind of a silly little thing, but it had to be the JFK portrait in the sitting room. Gosh, if I could have took that home with me, I would have. It's so kitsch and it's so cheesy and it's so Irish. I mean, all they need is a Pope picture beside it and we would have been sorted. So definitely, I got a little picture of it, so it's going to come up in a second, and you just need to absorb the retro goodness of this piece of art. Okay, so the next one we went to see was Glyn. Now, Glyn by nature is quite close to the sea. You couldn't really see it that day, but believe me, the views from the back garden of that house were down over the estuary. It was absolutely fantastic. It's mad to think that, like, we could bring her to see a house that was so dependent on the views to show the value of it, and she didn't get to see them at all. I mean, luckily enough, she doesn't live far away. She's familiar enough with Glyn, so she kind of at least knew what to imagine behind the storm clouds. But I mean, my favourite parts with that place, apart from the view from it, honestly, was the view on the way back to Limerick. So if she's commuting out that coast road every day, I mean, it was just absolutely fantastic. It was a beautiful setting. It was a lovely house. I mean, again, quite a solid house. There was pictures actually inside the house at the time, that just like little old photographs, and it's mad to think that, like, up until a couple of years ago, it still had a fitted kitchen and everything in it. Just the previous owner had pulled them out. So, like, the house wasn't neglected. It was just in the process of somebody doing it up when circumstances obviously changed or something. But, you know, it was a lovely house. I think another thing that I don't think we mentioned was the fact that that house is actually being sold with planning permission for, you know, a total redo. Now, the redo turns it into a modern monstrosity, in my opinion. But, you know, you don't need to use the planning permission, but the fact that planning permission was even given to renovate that house and to change the size of it, to make it a little bit bigger, is a really, really good sign. It's a sign that, you know, you might have a chance of getting something maybe a little bit more tasteful put onto it. But yeah, it's a good thing to have. You don't necessarily need to use it. Again, I'm all for not extending a house if you don't need to. I mean, sometimes the cost of extending a house can be nearly as much as the price of a house, especially with the price of houses I look at. You know, you could be looking €50,000 to put a decent extension on a house. So this is not something you have to do. I mean, look for a house that's the size you kind of want, as opposed to buying a really small house and thinking, oh, I'll just slap up an extension, because this is not a kind of thing you decide on a whim. This takes time and it takes a huge amount of money to do. Other than that, I think the thing about Glyn that I loved was just that it kind of gave Aisling this totally different way of life when she came home in the evenings. I mean, she could sit out in her garden, you know, have a cup of coffee or a cocktail looking out over the sea and things like that. And I mean, that to me sounds like a dream evening. I mean, definitely worth the commute for sure. And I remember when I was looking at that house, there was actually another house maybe like 2 fields down the road for sale as well, that was actually cheaper than this one. Now, it wasn't in as good a condition, so to me it didn't suit Aisling as well. But that tells me that houses around that area aren't that expensive. And when you're looking at paying the premium for a sea view, finding anywhere in Ireland where houses are affordable is a godsend. Okay, so last but by no means least was the farmhouse in Bodyke. Now, I really, really love this house. It reminded me a lot of my house, except my house wasn't nearly this fancy when I got it. I mean, this house had some problems, and they were quite obvious problems. But Aisling had a huge amount of money left over in her budget to fix the problems. And the problems that were there, like the chimney being damaged on the gable end and, you know, the head of the back window needing to be replaced. These are quite localised problems. They're not huge, all-encompassing, tear the roof off, pay 30 grand to put the roof back on situations. It wasn't like that. She had a couple of small problems that needed to be sorted. They could have very easily eaten maybe half of what budget she had left to do it, but once it's done, she was going to have a house that was so beautiful. I mean, this house, when you went inside it, was so solid and it was so gorgeous. And when you went upstairs, even like the height of the ceilings upstairs alone showed that this was not a kind of a mediocre Irish farmhouse. Like, this was a nice house. It was quite regal almost inside. I know it's very hard to see past that for a lot of people, but sometimes when you walk into a lot of houses like this, you start seeing trends, you start seeing things that a lot of these houses have. Like, I know with my house, when I bought it, the downstairs of it had lovely panelled doors. It had, you know, a lovely ornate staircase. Everything was lovely and fancy. It had a good parlour that people came in. And obviously if the priest came, that was where he was brought and stuff like that for his cup of tea. But once you got upstairs, it was a totally different world. Like, you had boarded doors with just little hooks to keep them closed. There was no carpets. There was literally plaster on the walls and nothing else. And I mean, this showed that, like, the parts of the house that people couldn't see were I suppose not renovated, were like decorated to a very, very low standard because only the people from the family were ever going to be in them. Now, this house in Bodyke, when you went upstairs, the upstairs was as grand as the downstairs, which says a lot about how much money the people had that owned the house and how much care was taken, I think, when it was designed. Like, it's one of those houses, I think, that, you know, it had a lot of nice touches that if it was completely renovated or saved in any way, it would be that kind of a house where you just go, oh my God, imagine if this had been lost forever. Like, it was a stunning house. You just needed to look past, I think, a lot of like the boarded up windows and things like that. I mean, even walking around from the back of the house, which was what was on the estate agent's listing, to the front, and you saw this like picture postcard house with, like, you know, the two windows either side of the door. There was a little pathway down to the road. There was like little daffodils and stuff sprouting out on either side of the path. I mean, this was like some woman's pride and joy, this little front garden. And it wasn't even the picture of the house that was put up on the listing, which is so bizarre. And there were outbuildings actually with that too. Quite nice stone outbuildings. And even though the house was on a lane, it was at the very end of a lane, which is really, really nice because, you know, you're kind of like the final point on the lane and it gives you a lot more privacy. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just really loved that house. I really did. So I got some video of this house. One of the main things I think I really loved about it was the fact that all the pictures were still hanging on the walls, all the family photos. So I went around and I tried my best to get a little video of them, and they're just so fantastic. I mean, wedding photos over generations. Come on, lads. Now, I tried my best to zoom in on them and get them focused. I did get all of them focused, so don't worry about that. But, I mean, it takes me a minute sometimes to do it. So, I mean, if your eyes go a bit, then just, you know, give it a minute. Because I'm not very good at this. And I'm not going to be like nabbing the cameraman to come over and take pictures of family photos for me. Not yet. Anyway, maybe next season I might be able to get them to do it. But yeah, so I'm including the family photos on it. And I think it's really, really nice because, to be honest, even losing them would break my heart. The fact that at least I got to get in and see them and record them for you guys is just one of those things that I think is a nice thing to do. So, I mean, definitely, hands down, Bodyke was my favourite house today. I don't even think I need to go into explaining why. It's a big house. It's one of those houses where if you saved it for the price it was, you would have a fantastic, fine, big farmhouse that you would have forever. You know, I mean, it's just the most beautiful house, and it's big, 3 bedrooms upstairs. I mean, and big size bedrooms too. So yeah, I mean, definitely Bodyke all the way for me. If I didn't have my house here, I would have 100% bought Bodyke. I would have went in there and I would have just went, look, fix the chimney, fix the roof, fix that window, and I'm just going to scrub everything else, and we'll see where we'll go from there. And I think it would have been great fun, and it would have been a beautiful house to finish up with. So yeah, Bodyke. So that's it for my little recap on all of the properties. I hope you enjoyed it. Check back next Tuesday. I'll do another one for episode 3. And yeah, until then, see you on Instagram.